Get in here. Get in here. If you're coming in, I don't want you scratching at the door.
I am Malcolm Childs.
And I am James Skiffins. And we are Just Making Conversation.
The show where we discuss the ins and outs of the model making hobby that we both love so much.
From the greasy sprues to the gloss coats and everything in between, we are going to just make conversation.
Remember, there are other podcasts you can listen to.
Plastic Model Mojo,
The Scale Model Podcast,
Plastic Posse,
On the Bench.
Model Geeks.
If you enjoyed the podcast, consider leaving a review or 5 stars, as it promotes this podcast to more people to enjoy.
Also, consider tossing a coin to your podcaster on Patreon. It just helps us make content for you. In this episode, we'll be just making conversation about the joy of model shows. Yes, that experience of looking at the new, the shiny, and the damn right unbelievable.
The experience that brings tears of joy and frustration of lost bargains. Those moments of recalling your youth when someone shouts, "Don't touch!" and the unforgettable smell of anticipation whilst queuing.
So hold the line, stand steady, wait for it, as we open the doors on the experience that is a model show.
Would you like to elaborate on why you're touching other people's models?
Well, you shouldn't be. That's the point. You shouldn't touch other people's models, certainly without permission. And permission should not be assumed that you can.
Would you even ask permission to touch someone else's model?
I think... that's a good question. I can't think of a time in which I have, and I can't think of a time in which it may have come up as such. However, saying that, I can think of an occasion where I was looking at something with such fascination that I think I might be right in saying that someone said you could pick it up as long as you're careful.
Oh, I see. They offered. That's fine.
Yes, but I don't think I've ever... I know I've never asked. I've just certainly never gone up to a complete stranger and said, "Do you mind if I just touch
There's
yours?"
absolutely no way that I would ever ask to touch someone's model unless... wow. Now I'm thinking about it. Now I give it some thought. I'm going to change my mind. If I was building something similar or was particularly interested in something and I wanted to see something, I would ask the person to show me on their model what I want to look at. So I'd say, "Would you mind picking it up so I can see underneath whether you painted it or not?" Because I've got a thing about painting underneath tanks at the moment.
Yes, you'd want clarification whether professionals painted the underneath the tanks.
Correct. Yes. Gotcha. But I wouldn't just say, "I'm going to pick your model up, here I go." I certainly wouldn't just pick it up. I wouldn't even attempt to say that I will pick it up. Definitely would let the person pick it up themselves. And if they say, "Oh, you're welcome, go ahead and pick it up," I still wouldn't feel comfortable.
I think I would certainly reflect it back to said person and say, "I think what you mean is you'd like to pick it up for me. I can't touch your prized possession there, and the thought of possibly dropping it would be just too much."
No, I'd rather they dropped it because of me rather than I dropped it.
Yes. I think the comment is more aimed at children, isn't it? You do have children at shows.
I don't think so. I disagree. I don't think it's always the kids.
I'm not blaming the kids completely, don't get me wrong. There are adults that behave in a similar manner. And I think also the other thing, a useful tip really to point out to people is don't run around in model shows.
I don't think we're preaching to that crowd. I think that it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? I think if the parents don't understand how important it is to touch, then a model show is not somewhere you should be with your family. But then saying that, in this country, we're very funny about touching things. In mainland Europe, they're much more open. Loads more kids go to model shows in mainland Europe than they do here. They're much more careful. Maybe they understand that I'll be a bit more...
Yeah, I've not experienced it myself in Europe. Yeah, I think you're right. We aren't very tactile And maybe that's the point. Maybe we should bring our children more often to things. But hey.
Yeah, or, teach them now that if you drop something, then you're going to have to fix it. Have you ever broken someone else's model?
No, touch wood. I've never experienced that horror. I nearly dropped a model or two at a show that belongs to me, but not anyone else's.
It's an awful and gutting thing when you see it happen. Seen someone drop their model once, and only a few bits fell off, but it was still like, you know how much work's gone into it, you know how much love and care has gone into getting that model from the workbench to a show, which could be 300 miles away, and then getting it there, and then you drop it. I shouldn't laugh, but oh god, the pain and the suffering. That's why I always carry a bit of super glue in one of my model boxes with the aircraft in there, so I can be that hero who says, "Don't worry, I have super glue."
You're that person with a cape.
Yeah. Answers on a postcard. What that hero would be: glue man.
Here I am to save the day.
Superhero of some sort that can, provide the glue necessary. I don't like to be the one that says, "Has anyone got glue? Because I just broke my models."
Yeah, it is one of the things, actually. I mean, we both have entered models into competitions, and I know when I've done so, I've always taken a repair kit, I think would be the politest way of putting it. It's a few bits and pieces from the bench that, just in case I might need, you never know. I mean, especially with one of the builds I did, I built a specific box for it to be travelling in and made underneath a space for a plastic box of bits, just in case. Bit of glue, tweezers, some eyes to be able to see what I was doing. If you're going to take your model to a competition, or even just for display, there's nothing worse than getting there and the journey you've made has shook the living daylights out of your model and a figure has fallen over. Or maybe the best advice actually I can give to anybody that's doing that, especially with dioramas, is place your figures in such a way in which you can take them out of said diorama and put them back in when you get to where you're going.
Oh, yeah. So make them accessible.
Yes.
I have a A400M 1/72 scale. For those who don't know, it's probably about as wide as your arm. It's a big model. And I had done it so that you can remove the tailplane with magnets, and you could also remove the wings from each side, and it packs into a little box, which is really good. And I thought of that because I knew for a fact that I was going to be showing that on my local club tables. Maybe consider that next time, making something big. Consider the movability of it.
Yeah, I think storage and movability is something you should always constantly think about within your building process.
That's the sad thing, though, isn't it, about when you do that? Because I know that when I get back from a model show, the model remains in that box in the garage, sealed, and doesn't see the light of day until the next show. I don't know if you're the same.
I've got one particular diorama that's in its box in which I made for it, and that hasn't been out since the last time it went to a show, which is a bit of a shame because it'd be good to get it out and have a look at it. I think, to be honest, that one of the main reasons it's in the box still, because at the time I had other things in my cabinets, because I've only got a small amount of display. One of those things in there is actually meant to be a boxed picture frame. It's actually designed to attach to a said wall.
Clever.
But the reason I've not done it is because I'm too nervous for it to fall off the wall.
Right. No, I understand that. Well, the only reason you've got no space in your cabinet to display models is because it's lined with trophies.
No, I don't.
You don't have a trophy cabinet?
I don't have a trophy cabinet, no.
Do you have a trophy wall?
No.
It's like you're like Arsenal. You have your own room just for the trophies.
When you say a trophy room, it's much more of a drawer, actually. I don't know why I don't do that, really, but I don't know. I don't put the medals or certificates on display. I guess, really, because when I look at the models, I know whether it won something or didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a case of my wife would let me. I don't think I feel overly comfortable with spreading my stuff around the house. A lot of people do. I'm not sure I'd want to look at my dioramas while watching the television.
I have all my models right next to the telly, so you can't not look at anything else, really.
Maybe an occasion has come up where I've put something out of my model room and I've been told to usher it away, and I've never approached the situation again.
Will you do a test? Test the theory?
Yeah, I could do, yes. I could certainly put something somewhere and see what she says.
Yeah, surreptitiously place it on her nightstand, pride a place, and see what's said. and then we maybe revisit it in the next podcast we do.
Actually, I think what I might do is I might take the model that she started painting out of the display case and put it next to her bedside table, just purely to remind her that she still hasn't finished it.
That's a bit passive-aggressive, though, that. I wouldn't recommend.
Gone off a little bit on touch with the subject, haven't we?
That's not like us.
No, not at all. Well, with model shows, the competition side of things, let's talk about that, because, I mean, obviously that can be quite a big part of any show.
Yeah, for some, yeah.
And certainly a topic that people associate with shows. You know, there are people that go to shows before competitions. There are people that are fearful of competitions. There are people that would definitely say that they would never enter anything that they build into a competition because they are not worthy.
Yes, there are people who build for competitions.
Yes, there are, yeah.
And only competitions, and that's what they do. It's cool. With you, then, I know that you're a competition person, aren't you? You like to enter your competitions.
I've entered a couple, yeah.
Why?
The reason I entered the competition for two reasons. Firstly, I wanted to see whether I could do it, just because, you know, I'm mad like that. Yes, but also it was a case of the first model I entered into a competition, I just wanted feedback.
Judged by your peers.
The level of criticism that people give to models, I shy away from. I run away from that quite a lot, just generally. Lots of reasons behind that. Won't go into it. Case of I wanted to give it a go, see if I could put my model in amongst some amazing models and see just how badly it stood out or didn't or whatever.
You need to positive up a bit.
Well, the positive was, the funny part of it was, I'll give you the short version of this.
Here we go. Get comfortable, go and get a drink, because James is going to tell the story.
It's just a short story. The funny part was that when the judging finished, this was at Telford, Telford International, one of, if not the, I would say the biggest shows in the UK. I didn't win anything. The model that won, it was a diorama I entered, strangely. The diorama that won was a very powerful, simple diorama. It was a two-figure, a bit barbed wire, one figure each side of the barbed wire. Incredibly powerful, well executed, moving, very cleverly done. I stood there admiring the models and thinking, well, yeah, I sort of stood there and thought, well, you know, it's not the best on the table, but it didn't look out of place, which was sort of the pat on the back, if you like, or recognition I wanted for myself. And then I was trying to listen to feedback, and I hadn't really had that opportunity before. Wasn't overcoming with information. And then I happened to bump into the winner of that section and made comment about the model, you know, congratulate, etc. And then said to him, I was like, is there any chance in which you can look at my model, give me some tips, tell me where I went wrong? I don't want to get ripped apart, but at the same degree, you know, that is the purpose of me entering the competition. I wanted that sort of feedback. Bringing the story to a close, basically what he did was he just pointed out a few basic things that could have been better. And all that was that the story was confused because I had one too many figures. The execution of said figures, he didn't really make comment. He didn't belittle me in any way, shape or form. He didn't say, you know, you need to practice your figure painting because they're really bad. So, yeah, it was quite positive. And it was a conscious decision on his part to point out those few areas that I could go away and concentrate on, which would make things better. Now, whether that was that person's doing or not, the next time I entered the competition, I won a gold. So,
did he ask you for tips afterwards? You could have said, hey, give me my gold back.
Yeah, we did see each other on the next Telford, and he did say, well conceived from start to finish, I think was all he said. I think he'd won a couple because he enters different parts of the competition. So he'd won a couple and got some recognition, but the one that he thought was going to get the recognition got nothing. So, yeah, it's quite strange in that respect.
That's good. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's not so much the diorama's execution as it is what it's saying to you, or what you're thinking, or what the narrative is, or the title. There's more to it than just painting it well.
This has come up on other podcasts and other conversations numerous times, in as much as when you build that Stuka, 148th Stuka, Does it need to be on a base? What does the base do for that Stuka? Personally, I think it should be on a base of some description.
Yeah.
But the rules of the competition state that the base won't be taken into account.
But does it have to have a base to get into the competition?
No, it doesn't. Reflecting back to earlier about taking the time and trouble of thinking, how are you going to store it? How are you going to display it? Do you need the wings to come off or not come off and all that sort of thing? If you're going to go for a competition, then you need to visualize how that's going to end up on that table. What is it going to look like? Does it need a mirror for all that amazing detail that you've done on the underneath of the aircraft for people to see? Now, judges will tell you that they will pick up your models and they will look at them. So you don't necessarily need to put a mirror. However, if you don't put that mirror there, they might not realise there's something of interest to look at underneath. Well, one thing I would say definitely to people about competitions, don't be scared of them. Enter them. Put your work forward. Go with the expectations that you think are right for you. Obviously, one of the main goals would be to win the competition, but maybe if it's the first competition you're entering, I would suggest to you that you might be in a better place if you don't go with that aspiration of coming away with a medal straight away.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe not. All depends, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, some people put a model in once in a blue moon and win every time.
I've seen people win competitions who have only just started modelling like 2 weeks before. The concept they had was fantastic and their execution was fantastic.
On the other hand, I've also seen people pick up their models from a competition and put them straight in the bin because they've not won anything. And that makes me cry for the fact that, you know, you put a lot of work into that. You know, take it home, consider what you've done, what happened, what you did wrong, what you didn't do wrong, and then throw it away.
Just going back to talking about the base on a model, if you're framing a piece of art, you've got to consider the frame, the way you're hanging it, and where you're hanging it. There's lots of considerations for where do you put your model? Do you put it at the back of the table? Do you put it at the front? Do you put it so that the judges will see it first? Do you put it so the judges will see it last? Do you put it next to another diorama that's already there, or do you kind of put it equidistant away from one? I think all of those little tiny things will make a difference when it comes to the judges who have a very difficult job of gauging the difference between excellent model making.
You should bring that up, actually, Malcolm, because that reflects back to the do you touch my model or don't you touch my model? Because that's the one time in which I have seen other people's models touched.
Oh, right.
Is when someone brings their competition piece to the table and positioning it within the other models is very important to that person, and models do get moved. I've seen it. Although they're not meant to, it does happen.
You don't do that.
No. Beware that if you turn up first, your model may not be in the position in which you put it in. And that's not necessarily down to people moving things around to get the optimum position. That can be also down to the judges, obviously.
Perhaps, yes. But this is something to consider. That's what I'm saying. You know, perhaps put it near where the best light is, or make sure you put it the right way around, obviously. Also, handwriting on the competition ticket. Write it neatly so the guy's going to read it. It's all those little things are going to reflect on your model. I've judged a competition once, and those little tiny things make a difference because you're looking for the ridiculously different, infinitesimal differences between two different models, and things like that do colour your judgment. So be careful.
But also, if you've taken the time and trouble to write out a description legibly, then you may be able to take that opportunity to tell the story of the model if it's not super obvious.
Yeah.
Or you may be able to explain something that you've done that isn't super obvious. And all those little things help build an understanding of what you created. And your comment about an artist, you know, does the artist think of the frame that his picture is going to be in? I think you're right. It's the same thing. But that's a whole different podcast about whether we are artists or not. I have a very strong opinion on that, but we won't go down that road.
Not yet.
Not today.
Not today. For me then, because you did ask.
I did.
I've entered one competition. And I won gold for that competition. It was a sci-fi category. It was for the Fine Molds Millennium Falcon. And there were 3 other models in that competition, in that little category. So I won gold, which didn't fill me with massive joy because I was beating these other ones. But I kind of felt like, yeah, I've done that now. You know, I've entered something in a competition and now I'm done. What I didn't like, interestingly, because it was my favourite model I'd done all year, okay? I'd gone to this model show. I was really looking forward to bringing it and showing it to everybody. And then I go and put it on the competition, and I don't see it all day. I don't see people looking at it. I don't see people talking about it. I don't see people asking questions about it. And then from then on, I thought, you know what? If I like the model, I'm going to sit with it, and I'm going to sit by it and hold its hand and say, yes, I did this. Look at this, rather than shoving it over there where people can't talk to me about it,
The 2 times I've entered a competition in Telford, the first time was to get that feedback, to get that interaction with people and listen to what people thought of what I'd put together.
Yes, yeah.
And the second time I did it, it was really nice to listen to what people thought, at what level they'd understood the story that I was trying to tell, because there were about 3 or 4 different levels that I'd put into this diorama.
Did you bug your model?
That would be so cool. Could you imagine having a live feed and sitting downstairs with a coffee and listening to what people were saying? Oh my God, look at that.
What did you do then? Did you kind of hang around and loiter? Did you loiter at Telford to listen to people discussing?
On the first occasion, yeah, I did try loitering. It didn't work. It just didn't work. It was so unnatural and so obvious and uncomfortable. It was awful. On the second occasion, I went up with a couple of friends and couldn't quite get close enough to the model. I could see that it had won something, but I couldn't quite see what it was. And I actually, rather than seeing it for myself, was told by someone who was looking at the model, "Oh, you won a gold," which was fantastic. Absolutely blown away by it. So I literally spent 5 or 10 minutes walking around the table where my model was and looking at the competition's entries and other categories and bits and pieces.
I can imagine someone's staring at your model and looking at it, looking at left and looking at right, and then they go to walk away and you say, "Oh, I saw you looking at my model there. Would you like to know more?" Here's a leaflet.
Yes, here's a leaflet. Here's my email address, and yes, please
call me.
Please let me know. It was quite bizarre. I got the gratification from a few bits, and then I got a few more flattering comments as I went around looking at other people's work. There was a moment I recall looking at someone else's garage that someone had made, down to the screws in the half-driven screws in the walls, hanging calendars up. The detail was phenomenal. I'm studying this model, and someone went to me, "Oh yeah, you got gold to say, oh, really good, right? Yeah, thanks, thank you." No, what I mean was, it's really, really good, really good. Yeah, thank you. I actually got annoyed. I'm grateful, but I'm trying to look at someone else's model.
I will be available later for autographs.
Oh, I sound so horrible. There was that split-second moment where I was like, oh, God. I found that so weird. I was quite cross with myself. Luckily, I didn't give a reaction or anything like that, but it was what was in my head. I was quite cross at.
Fame can be such a terrible thing.
But Malcolm, have you experienced the dash in a model show?
We were talking just before the show. I've never queued up to get into a model show before that I can remember. I've always been displaying, so I was always there very early. I've seen it. We are at the very front of Telford, and usually you can see when the doors open, people rushing in. A lot of people scoff at that, and they think, "Oh, that's so ridiculous, how silly." I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic that we have a hobby that people are willing to run for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not something to be scoffed at in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and more power to them. I think there should be more people running to get their super bargains. And that's what kind of buzz about Telford is. It's going to go and get a bargain and go and find out the thing before everyone else does, and finding out what ethics are going to release that day before anyone else. It's exciting. Dangerous, but awesome.
Extraordinary to watch and take part in. But one thing that I learned the hard way several occasions is when you go to a show with an expectation of picking a particular kit up at that super bargain, never seen once or ever again price. Don't don't necessarily go to a show expecting that. And maybe my advice would be to have expectations that are more manageable, because I know of many people, and I have experienced myself that moment where you're walking around.
What kit was it, James?
Oh, the particular kit
tell me all about it.
Do you want the short or the long version?
The shortest version you can possibly muster.
Saw a kit, liked it, wanted to get, went to several tables, couldn't find the price I wanted, went back to the original table and found it had already been sold.
What kit was it?
Bronco, yeah, the Bronco Horse Glider 135th.
Oh, the Horse Glider, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I went to the show thinking they're bound to have loads of them. And I'm going to get the best price. And all the places I went to didn't have them, bar two or three, I think it was. And the first place I went to was the cheapest price in the halls. And unfortunately, by the time I got back to it, it had already been gone because there was only one there.
Yeah, that's a shame. I guess, yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn, isn't it? I guess you did pay nothing for it, so it saved you money.
Yeah, it saved me a great deal of money because I still haven't got the kit. It's funny, isn't it? I always say when you because the other thing with model shows as well, of course, is the trade side of things. And you get people looking at a model and, I don't know, I don't think it's worth that. I'm not quite sure. And I've always said to them that if I pick a model up and I see a value in it, that value is X. It doesn't necessarily be what's on the label, but that's how much it is to me. I don't haggle with people, but I will ask, be quite cheeky and say, is there any movement on this price? If the figure that comes back is within what I think it's worth to me, then I'll buy it. If it's not, then I won't. Maybe I'm just a crazy fool. To my mind, that seems like a sensible way of going around model shows. If you're going into a retail trade stall, then you're going to be paying retail prices because it's a retail trade stall.
Well, one thing of note about that is that if you do pay for a model kit, don't touch it, don't start it, don't open it, don't do anything, because you will likely, in a year's time, when they maybe decide that you don't want to build it anymore, you can, not if you take it back to a trade store, but get almost the same price for it again. If you sell it on eBay, you probably could get the money back. So I always say that it's an investment.
Most kits won't lose money.
Unless you buy them at the beginning when they're released.
Yes, of course. If you're going to buy a brand new kit, then yes, you potentially will lose something. If it's a run-of-the-mill Spitfire, the chances are, yes, you will.
Yeah.
If it's something a little bit different, a little bit special, then you probably won't. The same thing applies, is that the kits I have in my stash, in my mind, they're worth X amount of pounds.
Yes.
And if I go to sell it and someone doesn't want to give me 25 quid for a kit that I think is worth 25 quid, then I won't sell it.
Lots of different types of people go to model shows, would you say? Or is there an interesting amount of people that aren't necessarily enthusiasts that go to model shows?
To be honest, for me, this is where I'm a bit quirky, for want of a better phrase. It's actually one of the parts of a model show in which I really love. I mean, obviously, part of that is the social element, meeting up with people that you have been talking on a Facebook group for 2 or 3 years and never actually physically met them. Yeah. There is that side, but then obviously for me, I'm a bit of a people watcher. I don't know if that's a right phrase, but
there's probably laws about it.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure there are, and many of them are against my name. But that's not the point, Malcolm. I'm a bit of a people watcher, so I quite like sitting having a cup of coffee and watching who's mingling around the show. And looking at the man who's brought his wife and his children, and it's quite clear in that family there's only one person interested in models. And then, of course, you've got the other side of the coin where you look at I'm going to pick on couples, so sorry about this, but I've seen the occasion where I've seen a couple and thought, oh yeah, bought your missus, did you? And then the more you watch, the more you realise that, oh no, actually, it's the missus brought him. He didn't want to. So yeah, that's quite good. It's quite fun to in your mind, not out loud. Otherwise, it does become a bit of a legal issue. Is to see if your expectations are correct. So yeah, and the same with kids as well. We've touched upon this earlier. You don't see that many kids in UK shows, which is a shame in some respects.
Not enough.
But I certainly have seen some, and the ones I have seen, I've been very enthusiastic indeed.
They need to be encouraged way more than they are, I think, generally.
And I think this is where this old comment comes up all the time about, is the hobby dying? Have we got enough youth coming through and all that sort of stuff? There are people out there, but I think I think the other side to the children as well, something in which we should maybe take into account here is, we've already spoken about stigma and all that sort of stuff in a previous episode, and maybe that's part of it too. Maybe it's a case of they don't want to come out of the closet quite yet.
Maybe,
they're not willing to shout and be proud of the fact that they are scale modelers, and they're secret modelers.
Yeah, this is a shame because there's a lot of talented people out there who can make amazing things, and they should be lifted on a pedestal. As far as I'm concerned, it is a shame. But hey, what can you do? I guess you just have to keep on going and maybe make a podcast about modelling and try and get everyone to listen to it.
Yes, maybe. But I'm going to throw back. I'm going to throw back the question to you. Is there a stereotypical modeler that you look out for at a show?
I'm always amazed that there are so many people who go to model shows that aren't in model clubs that are interested in modelling. My local show, which is a Salisbury show, I go along and I meet people. They say, "Oh yeah, I really like the models. It's really fun. It's a hobby I like." And I say, "Oh, okay, great. Where do you live?" "Oh, I live in Salisbury, but I don't go to the club." So why don't you go to the club if that's what you're interested in? Then further your hobby and join your local club so you can come and sit on this side of the table, and it'll be great. I go to the Salisbury Model Show is the biggest local one to me. So I'm always amazed to see the people who go who aren't in clubs. I think, but I do enjoy talking to the wives of said husbands who are dragging the wives around, because the wives are always, because I always ask them, like, you into any crafts as well? Do you like any creative crafts? And as soon as you ask, it's like, oh yeah, actually, I really like blah 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 blah, and you can talk about that because we're all makers, we're all crafters, we're all creatives, I guess, and there's that in common, So if you do see a bored wife, so stereotypical, but if you do see a bored human at a model show, there's definitely something you can talk to them about for sure, even if they're not into phantoms or tiger tanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually, and it pretty much echoes what we keep saying over and over again in many different ways throughout the podcast so far, is that the whole point of the community is that you make it a community, you involve everybody, and that doesn't necessarily mean only the people that make models. You're quite right, their partners, etc. It's good to make them feel as part of the community, even though they might not pick up a model.
No, absolutely. And I always say, you should have a go at least one model in your life and see how you get on with it. Always try and give gifts as models. That's my thing. Try and give people, to say thank you. Here's an Airfix kit. And then, what the bloody hell am I going to do with that? Well, build it. You'll find out. It's the gift of the hobby. I said that, lifting my arms in the air, and glitter flew out. Beams of light, the gift of the hobby.
Oh dear. Yeah, I think that it is amazing. I mean, I'll be honest. I have had the occasion where I've gone to a model railway show with my father, and funny enough, yes. I'm a little bit like him taking his wife. I'm not really that interested. There are elements of model railway that I find quite fascinating, and some that cross over within my own hobby, of course, be it terrain or stuff like that. So yeah, I do have the occasion where I go on a model railway exhibition with my father, and I experience it from the other side, so to speak. I'm not super interested in model railways. There are some crossovers, of course, with the hobby, be it terrains and stuff like that. And there are some things that interest. Sorry?
Trains.
What did I say?
There's some crossover with trains, or did you say terrains?
Terrains.
Oh, terrains. I thought you You said trains. So of course there's going to be trains. It's a railway show.
I always find crossing over trains to be quite fascinating. I never realised you could do that, really.
Terrain or train? Carry on.
I should pronounce my terrain more. Yeah, so there are some crossover with model railways. Obviously, there is the terrain side of things and how you get your trees to stand upright and all that sort of stuff. And some other elements of the hobby that are quite useful and quite interesting. But if I'm honest, an awful lot of it is not something that really floats my boat. It's something that my father sort of echoes, and maybe it's my father's fault really, is that he's always wanted to build a layout, but once it's done, he doesn't know what to do with it. So,
are you the sort of person who would, if you did have a railway, would you have the conductor's hat and would you keep a timetable?
I'm shivering as you say it. No, I totally get why people do it. I work on the railway, so I totally get why someone would want to reenact what they do at work, or maybe have always wanted to do as their job instead of being an insurance broker or whatever. So I totally understand it. There's nothing different from an insurance broker being the yard man as there would be for a grown man running around a field in a military outfit reenacting.
Yeah.
I totally understand it. Totally understand it. But for me personally, if I had a layout and I had to be with Bill, John, and Trevor, looking at a timetable and pressing the buttons at the right point, right time, because that's the timetable, no, that's not for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's fascinating to watch, but I certainly wouldn't want to experience it for myself.
I guess it's, they've got the model, but also they're moving. And so you've got an extra layer of things that you can get interested in. You have to have terrain. Mm-hmm. You have to have interest in trains. And you also have to be pretty good with your electronics. Mm-hmm. And obviously very good at timekeeping.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, it is something in which I totally understand. And if I had a layout, then I would have something with lots of terrain and I would be constantly adding to it. That's the bit I like. I make no bones about it. I like dioramas. I like doing that sort of stuff, telling a story, etc. And that's fantastic. But to me, once you get to that point where your train goes round and round in circles and you put all the houses you can and fields and cows and other items onto your layout, then that is the point where for me personally, I'd have to rip it apart and start again. As a bit of a hats off to the railway community that may or may not be listening to us. If you get a chance, go to Hamburg and go and see the greatest railway layout in the world.
I'd love to go there.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Seriously. Absolutely phenomenal. A working airport, literally. They fly in, they taxi, they unload, and they fly back out. Brilliant. Oh, it's amazing. Just absolutely phenomenal what they've achieved. And if I'm honest, there are some few things within that you could potentially bring into our hobby as scale modelists, and you certainly could have a layout where your tanks move and flashy lights and smoke and all that sort of stuff. It's all possible, very, very possible.
Well, you look at remote control; they stick moving parts and smoke and everything else.
But just imagine for a second how cool it would be if you were one of the scale hobbyists that we are, who likes airplanes. And you have a thing about Lancasters, for example. Let's go smaller. Let's go Spitfires. You like Spitfires.
Okay.
How cool would it be for you to have a runway where your Spitfires taxi, your propellers go round and they fly off to the sunset or sunrise to go and fight the enemy and then fly back? How cool would that be? It'd be amazing, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be. I think it'd be really amazing. It'd be enormous. You'd need a warehouse for it, but it would be quite interesting. And we don't have that, but they do in Hamburg, and their layouts are very good. They're full of humour that you have to look for. I got to be honest. I won't go into any detail. Family show and all that, but I would say it echoes true life on the railway in every facet.
Oh gosh, righto. Okay. How terrible.
Yes. Obviously the delays aren't so bad, and they're not as crowded, but other than that, every other facet. But yeah, getting back to model shows.
We were talking about model shows, and that's what it says on the tin.
Lucky I did a short story, huh?
Yes. Cut a long podcast short. making friends at your local club, sitting with your buddies, eating sausage rolls, talking about your models, talking about what you've brought. It's always that discussion, isn't it? When someone comes back with a plastic bag, and you sat there, and your mate comes in and you go, "Oh, what have you got?" And then they go, "I got this." And then everyone shows and look at the sprues and you sift the plastic and, you leaf through the instruction manual and they're all very excited because they've bought their new model kit. And then it's your turn to go and look around because someone's got a man at their stand. I love it. I think it's really cool fun.
Wouldn't you say that brings back childhood memories of being in the sweet shop?
Yeah, but we didn't have a stand at a sweet shop.
Oh, no, that's true. That moment where your mate comes out of the sweet shop, you go, "Oh, what you got? What you got? What'd you get?" Oh,
I guess it is. Yeah, I would just have a bag of pink shrimp, but that's another podcast.
Oh, no, it's a completely different podcast. But yeah, I mean, I'm not actually, funny enough, a member of a club per se. So
No.
I haven't experienced. Why aren't I?
Why not?
Just mark that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Why aren't I? Yeah, good question. I don't really know. There's not really an answer to it.
Is there a local club to you?
Not super local, no, but it's journeyable too. If I'm honest, I suppose one of the main reasons I'm very active on the social media side, i.e. Facebook, etc., and forums and not so much forums now, but yeah, that sort of thing, is because the nearest club to me is a reasonable distance, and it's in towards London, and I don't want to journey into London. No. I could go slightly a different direction, and that's a bit further away. But if I'm honest, my biggest hang-up, my biggest problem, which will probably tickle you a little bit, is I don't really understand quite how I'm meant to take the model I'm working on right now in a box with everything that's in my hobby room to go and sit and chat and make my model.
Yes, it doesn't make me laugh.
Yeah, I know you. I knew that would.
How ridiculous that would be.
But to be honest, that's been one of the biggest things that stopped me ever joining the club. There are other parts, but that is one of them. Is that I know when I pack my box, I'm going to leave my scalpel behind, or I'm going to leave something behind that I'm going to desperately need.
Yeah, that's assuming that your local club would actually do a modelling night. My local club, which is Newbury, we just sit down and have a beer, and if you've built something or are working on something, then you bring it on and you show everybody, and that's it. I understand that if you're working on a diorama and there's 60 parts to it, you don't want to bring it along. But people bring along like what they've bought, with a brand new kit or something, just to sort of put it on the table and eventually chat about. We very rarely talk about models, to be honest.
Yeah, this is the thing. My aspirations of what joining a club would be are very probably different to what actually happens, and that's my ignorance, which is fair enough. But it's not because I do so much stuff online. With the hangouts and the social clubs that I'm part of, I get everything I need from a social side of things, probably more than I need actually, from just that.
Yeah,
so
of course.
To drive away in a car for half an hour to an hour to go and sit with a bunch of guys, it isn't something that super appeals to me. However, with that said, the one thing I really do enjoy about Telford, for example, is the social aspect to it. And that's purely because I'm away for the weekend. I've chosen to do that. The main reason I've done that is for the competition side of things, because I've entered something into the competition. Yeah. But funny enough, before everything went totally crazy last year, I did. It was the 1 year in which I wasn't going to enter the competition. Wow. But I was still going to go for the weekend.
Right, yeah. Well, you didn't enter the competition, did you?
Well, no, I didn't enter the competition and I didn't go, but that's not the point. I might have had a chance of winning if I was there. Oh, look at this! Oh, no, the judges wouldn't have been there. Oh, no, okay, fair enough. But no, the social side of things actually has increased a lot for me in my experience of model shows. So, Yeah, maybe it's just part of the journey that I'm taking.
Have you ever sat on the other side of a club table at a model show? So on the inside, looking out?
Of sorts, yes. That's where the vantage point for me comes in, is the watching people element that I quite enjoy. Watching people trundle around and looking at the work that you've got displayed. And quite often you'll find where you're sat with your table, not necessarily will you be just surrounded by other club members and other clubs or associations. You might have the odd trader. But of course, there is the other side of the coin as well, where the clubs do have a few bits and pieces under the table in which they're selling as well.
Why would you, or why should you, if you hadn't or haven't yet, visit a model show?
Now this is that's a great question, actually, Malcolm.
I know, you wrote it.
Oh, did I? Oh, well, there you go. I'm going to turn that around on its head a little bit, actually. Firstly, why should you go to a model show? It's a great experience to go and see what other people are working on, showing their techniques, etc., etc. Most people within the club table environment are more than happy to talk about their own model. And to be honest, most of the other members will quite happily talk about someone else's model as well. So if you've got a question about how did they get a certain effect, you will learn things along the way. You also have the opportunity to pick up items for your hobby, supporting traders that are sometimes local, sometimes not. But also, most often than not, you'll find, especially tool-wise, you'll find different tools in which you may not have in your local hobby store available. A bit like myself, and go,
Gotta have one of those.
And what I would say to you, if you're not quite sure of your hobby, if you're not quite sure what your hobby entails, I would strongly recommend going to Telford once in your lifetime. The reason being is because I can guarantee it doesn't matter how long you've been making models, it doesn't matter what your knowledge is. If you've not attended Telford once, I guarantee you will not only be surprised with your mouth on the floor going, oh my God, look at that, because there is so much to see. And also with that particular show, as it's suggested within its name, we have a lot of international clubs and vendors that attend that show. And they are the opportunities to see things that you won't see every day in your local hobby store. Though, of course, as always, we would suggest strongly that you encourage and support your local hobby store to make sure that they're there for tomorrow and the next day and next month and next year.
Although Telford is an event, there should be lots of model shows around that you can go to and mingle with other people. You can gawp and gasp at people's work, and you can talk to the modeler who it should be sat right in front of you, and you can ask them, say, how in the world did you do that? How did you get that colour? How did you get that gloss effect? How did you manage to build those Spitfire wings in the right way? How did you get it to weather so well? So many questions you can ask, and a modeler would love to talk to you about it, because that's why you sat there.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to the guys and the girls.
But just remember the smaller shows, and there are numerous ones around, not necessarily at different weekends. There are some shows that there are several around the country. In the UK or internationally, of course, don't forget the guys in Europe and in America and Brazil. Yeah. And, there are shows all around the world every weekend. And one of the things in which I enjoy so much is seeing what those shows are like.
Yeah.
The smaller shows, they are the more intimate shows. They're the ones where you will no doubt see the person that made that model sat behind the table. And they're more than happy not only to talk to you, but you're within an environment which a quiet chat is easily done. The bigger shows, there's a lot more hustle and bustle going on, and it can be a little bit difficult to have those more personal conversations. And bringing the international flavour in to everything we've been talking about, I often speak to people from around the world who go to shows, and I've been fortunate enough that they've taken pictures of shows and explained their experiences, which I've shared in videos and in other different things. But it's really quite amazing to see how a hobby can be so different, so transformed in a different culture. For example, the Japanese shows, just mind-boggling, some of the stuff that they make, but also the kits that are available, because there's quite a lot of kits, and people don't often realise this, there's quite a lot of kits in Japan, for example, in which we don't see in the UK or in Europe.
Right, yeah.
They have quite a different market, and their market wants different things. And it's amazing to see what that actually means to the hobby within that community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the differences. I'd love to go to Hamburg. I should go to Hamburg one day. Podcast live from Hamburg.
You really do need to. Honestly, I'm not a rail enthusiast by any means, but
Clearly.
I was taken to it because the people we were with knew I was a model maker and thought I'd be interested. And my wife is not a model maker, and she was quite impressed.
Wow.
So
there you go. That's the litmus test, isn't it?
Yes, it has my wife's approval, so you must go.
A model show is a moment of time for the community to come together, share experiences, tips and tricks, but also the chance to drool over the wonders of others' accomplishments.
But also a time for us all to come out of the cupboard, be proud as we are one. We are modelers.
You have been listening to Just Making Conversation
With James Skiffins
and Malcolm Childs. Follow us on Facebook, where we post photos, updates and other nonsense. Just let us know what you are making and what your thoughts are on the conversation on this episode. We have to thank our supporters, who we dearly appreciate. Please support us in any way you can by sharing to Facebook or supporting us on our patreon.com.
Next time we'll be just making conversation about out of the box or not. Goodbye.
Goodbye.